Welcome to our webinar on scaffolding with phenomena for the science KSA, so the Kentucky Statewide Assessment. I want to go through some quick introductions to walk you through who I am. Welcome. So my name is Brendan Finch. I taught middle and high school science for 7 years. And after that time, I left the classroom, and I guess partly while I was in the classroom, I built rocketlit.com. So it's our leveled science reading website. And we started working on innerorbit.com at the same time. And now that's the source of the material that we're talking about today. And so I wrote a lot of the assessments on the site. A lot of the content that we're going over today comes from that assessment writing and speaking with teachers and teacher leaders. But I spent a lot of time now speaking with thought leaders and, talking to our teachers and our administrators to find out better ways for us to support them as you're building out capacity with your students and colleagues for sense making and for the NGSS. I also believe that salty baked pumpkin seeds are the best part of pumpkin carving. The art part is not there for me. I'd rather do a little drum solo on a pumpkin, and that's what I'm into. I'm more into music, but pumpkin seeds I'm super duper into. So that's my Halloween statement for the day. Cool. Well, to kick us off, I want to walk you through what InnerOrbit is to kind of give you a little bit of background on what we do. So InnerOrbit is 4 simple things. So what we do, we find phenomena. So those are things that occur in the natural world for students to take their understanding of and apply that understanding to make sense of something new. And with those phenomena, and that's the goal of these standards and what students have to do on the KSA, we want to give students opportunities to take their learnings and apply it to lots of different things. So we have lots of phenomena on the site for every standard. And today's session is going to focus on how you can use this phenomena, not just for formal assessment, but also informally in your classrooms. We also write questions for those phenomena, so you can slowly pick apart where students are at with their understanding of knowledge, their ability to make connections between that knowledge and a cross-cutting concept or an SEP, or three-dimensional sense-making questions that are super duper rigorous. And after those questions are given and students take those questions on our platform, you get really detailed reports on not just the fact that students are struggling with developing these models or a group of SEPs, but instead we'll say, students are struggling to develop a model to describe unobservable mechanisms. And that is a component of the standards at the 6-8 grade level. So we want to be really specific about, what we need to work on and where students are making good progress. We also do a lot of professional learning. So if you have not attended one of these webinars before, which I know some of you have who are here, welcome. We also do in-person and virtual professional learning built around research. We actually have a team member who did her own research on professional learning for the NGSS, and that was a part of her doctorate. And so she builds a lot of our sessions. That's a shout out to Erin. And if you'd like to explore any of our sessions or our website, and you're not familiar with InnerOrbit, if you want to try InnerOrbit out and you're not already doing that, then you're welcome to do that. But without further ado, let's dive into our session for today, and let's see where we're at. So our objective for today in this webinar is to explore release test items and some strategies to help students make sense of phenomena through transfer tasks. Wow, that was hard to say. We're going to be here for about an hour. I'll be honest, I think we're going to finish a little bit early. So, hey, Halloween, surprise, boo. At first, we're going to talk about phenomena and sense making, where we're talking about representation and sense making, and then go over some criteria. So, are phenomena novel? Are they engaging? And are they culturally relevant and accessible to our students? After that, we'll talk about phenomena in the KSA assessment specifically. So, what should students be looking for in that assessment? We'll look at some phenomena examples from the KSA, and then we'll pull some InnerOrbit examples to look at how we might scaffold up to that through lots of examples of phenomena. And then we have some really specific strategies where you can use these, not just with these phenomena, but any phenomena to apply, give students lots of opportunities to make sense of those new things, to access and then transfer the knowledge to phenomena. One of the things that we've heard from a lot of our partner districts is that just giving students opportunities to make the connection between the anchoring phenomena and a novel phenomena is really challenging. And so what we want to present today is that by giving them many opportunities of genuine phenomena to take and say all right, I'm going to talk to you about this one thing, but it also, you can say it here and here and here and here and here. And every single thing we talk about in class, we're going to give you lots of different phenomena for you to take and apply that learning to. So whenever I'm just going to talk about this one idea, this one genetics or heredity or ecosystems example, but I'm going to talk about this one thing, but you're going to see it all over. And there's lots of examples of it. So that's kind of what we want to bake into this session. Cool. So to kick it off, I want to talk a little bit about what phenomena and sense making are through a really specific example. So we're going to dive into a middle school performance expectation, MS ESS 1-3. And through this, we're going to look at examples of what phenomena and sense making might be or might not be. So this standard asks students to analyze and interpret data to determine scale properties of objects in the solar system. And so we're going to give you two different questions, and we're going to compare and contrast those questions and see which one of these genuinely gives students the opportunity to make sense of phenomena, or maybe does not. Or maybe they both do. I don't know. Students should be using the SCP Analyze and Interpreting Data. They need to understand the disciplinary core idea, Earth and the solar system, the fact that there are objects at different sizes in the solar system, gravity holds them together, and scale, proportion, and quantity. So in this performance expectation, unlike most of the PEs that we look at, the cross-cutting concept, scale, proportion, quantity is actually a central component of the standard and what students have to do. So I'm going to give you two questions. The first question is put the planets in order from largest to smallest according to diameter. So we give students a data table of a bunch of planets and their diameter, and you got to put them in order. The second question we're going to ask students is we give them a data table using the diameter, type of planet material, and then also the approximate size of storms in miles, the diameter of storms. And we say, your classmate Pablo says that Earth has some of the biggest storms for the size of our planet. Pretty geocentric, Pablo. Explain whether Pablo's claim is correct by using the data in figure A to compare the scale of Earth storms in relation to Earth size to the scale of storms on other planets. So in the chat, I'd like you to share just real quick, what are the differences between these two questions? And then why is noticing those differences important for us as educators? I'm going to go through my analysis and kind of walk you through a little bit to connect those dots and say, what are the differences between these questions and why is that important to us? So really explicitly, this first thing is completing a task that students have more than likely seen before. There's nothing novel about this task. It is ordinal numbers. It's just, do you know the order of these numbers? And can you put them order from largest to smallest? They're not explaining how or why, which are central components of phenomena and sense making. And they're just kind of representing their knowledge about the size of planets. Honestly, these could be like fruits. It doesn't matter what is here. Students need to, they just need to put these numbers in order. And it could be anything. We look at molecules of sand in different parts of the world or whatever it is. So the second question is inherently different. Students using data to explain the idea that there are these different bodies within the solar system, and that those occur at different scales. And that's really the idea. The three dimensions here are that students are using their understanding of the solar system, scale, proportion, quantity. They're analyzing, interpreting data, and all of that is in service of making sense of the phenomena. So, like a claim that a student, said that, oh yeah, like Earth has the biggest storms because I don't know, I'm from Earth and like that's all I know maybe. But students need to look at scale properties of the solar system and apply their understanding in this data set specifically to decide, what those scale properties are of these different bodies within the solar system, which is really, really interesting. And so this is the kind of question that we call phenomenal. These are questions where students are applying those three dimensions to a specific and novel situation. So it's very discrete, it's very specific. So I want to walk you through a little bit of an introduction to what sense-making phenomena are, now that we've gone through some examples of what it is and what it is not. So a crucial part of sense-making phenomena is that phenomena problems are the most critical predictor of whether a task gives students an opportunity to engage in three-dimensional performances. You may have tried to write questions about a phenomena that is not rich at all, like a GIF or an image. It's very, very difficult. And so we need to have rich phenomena where we can ask rich questions of those phenomena. And so the question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we ensure that we're including things that are engaging, relevant, and compelling in our assessment tasks, and maybe even in the things that we use instructionally as well? So how can we do that? And I want to offer 3 criteria from this Achieve article. So if you're not familiar with Achieve, they are the body that pulled together state partners and help them to write the NGSS. And so Achieve also put out a lot of content guiding publishers and districts on assessments for the standards. And this is a summary of one of their resources. So criteria 1 for sense making and phenomena is it novel? So some things to consider here are, is this situation new to your students and not a scenario that they have seen in class before? So if we have an anchoring phenomena that we go through, we can't use that phenomena in an assessment. We can't say they're making sense of something if we use the same phenomena as our anchoring phenomena in our assessment phenomena. In addition, a phenomena needs to be based around something specific, an instance, not a broad topic or generally observed occurrence. And so like Inspector Clouseau here, we want your kids to say that, they've never seen that before in their life. And that's the idea, that we want students to be making sense of novel phenomena in order to show that they deeply understand what we're looking at. The second criteria for students is this accessible and culturally relevant? And so things to consider here are, is the phenomena a real world observation? Is this something that they can actually see in the real world? Are we giving them well-crafted and grade appropriate data? So if I just sent them a huge spreadsheet of lots of different facts about planets, and I was presenting it to a 6th grade group of students, they may be overwhelmed. But maybe that big, dirty, hairy data set we could send out to a group of high school students because we want them to grapple with that. And so finding things that are grade appropriate and well-crafted are really, really important. And then finally, can I explain this phenomena, this thing, through grade appropriate DCIs, SCPs, and cross-cutting concepts? Is it too simple? Is it too complex for me to use what we know? And then finally, the last thing is, does it effectively use at least 2 modalities to present information? And so ideally, we want students to be using, visual modalities, audio modalities, be reading as well as like looking at images and pictures or graphs. So there need to be at least 2 modalities used to give it greater accessibility for those kiddos. And finally, is it engaging? And so we want to find out, is the phenomena presented to students as something puzzling or intriguing? Is it rich enough to drive the task at hand? We need to provide students with enough information to engage in sense making, but not tell them the answer. And finally, does it provide a compelling question or observation that needs to be explained? So just like Mr. Johnson from Abbott Elementary here, we want them to look at something and be like, interesting, and to be able to see something that is compelling enough for them to want to explain it. Okay, to review, some of the 3 criteria that we want to find in phenomena in order for us to then ask these rigorous questions are, first, is it novel? So those novel phenomena allow us to move students from representing what they know to making sense of those new situations. And then finally, is it accessible and culturally relevant? So is this appropriate for my students? Is this a real world example? So those are 2 examples of things that, make things culturally relevant and also accessible. And then finally, is it engaging? So is this puzzling? Do observations need to be made to make sense of the phenomena? Or are you just able to Michael Scott this and, understand everything about it without even looking at it deeply because it's too superficial or too complex for you to make sense of? I'm not really sure where Michael Scott falls on that spectrum, but that's interesting. Cool. So now let's talk about how we can take those phenomena and then apply them in the context of preparing for the KSA. And we want to look at a couple of different strategies and a couple of examples of phenomena, but we always like to anchor this in something real that students are actually going to see on that test. And so first off, so there's a phenomena on the release test items for Kentucky's assessment around kudzu or kudzu. I think it's kudzu. And essentially, so I'm not going to read this entire slide to you, but in the phenomenon and on the release test items, there's this plant. And as we're driving through the South, we see like this plant all over the place. In some cases, it's covering trees, there's dead trees. And the student goes on to do research and pull information. They get some information from their mom, and then they also pull information off of, different websites. And a lot of the questions ask the students, to consider what they know about ecosystems and also how they're obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information from these different sources. It's very, very rich, very interesting phenomena. So one of the questions they ask is, kudzu has a competitive relationship with the ecosystems where it has spread. Which of these observations best explains this statement? So students have to choose an observation that supports the idea that kudzu has a competitive relationship with the ecosystems where it's spread. So you can see right here that students have a rich phenomena. So this is real thing that's happening in probably something they can witness, driving around or definitely looking online. And it's specific. It's this one plant doing this thing to these, these different ecosystems, these forest ecosystems. And now they have to take that information and apply the concept of competition within ecosystems to that. And so this is actually pulling from the performance expectation MS-LS24. And so I want to go over that PE with you really quick here so you can see what that looks like. But MS-LS24 involves students constructing an argument supported by empirical evidence that changes to physical or biological components of an ecosystem affect populations. So we want to take the idea that if we change an ecosystem, it's going to change populations of organisms. In this case, that the observations that are being made are that this plant, this vine that is spreading rapidly, it's impacting these populations of trees. These trees are dying because they're not having a good time when they're covered in this vine. So the 3 dimensions that we're looking at here within this standard for that question are the SEP engaging an argument from evidence. Students have to understand that ecosystems are dynamic and that if you disrupt those ecosystems, it can lead to changes in the populations of those ecosystems. And finally, that stability and change are at play here, where a small change in one part of a system may cause larger changes in another part. And ecosystems are so interrelated that if you change one tiny little thing, you introduce this vine, it can change lots of different populations. And so let's say we're looking to review for this content, and we're going to take this standard MS-LS 424, and we're going to build slowly over time. And so I want to present you with a roadmap of phenomena. And so these are actually pulling from phenomena on the inner orbit site to sort of build students up and give them lots of exposure to this. So changes in the ecosystem can impact, for the kudzu and the forest populations there. But we can also see that in the correlation between global warming and marine populations. So maybe at the beginning of your unit, you give students the example of, like the coral and global warming and marine populations. So changes in the environment being either the acidification of the ocean or the warming of the ocean, and how that impacts coral and marine populations, both being, parts of that ecosystem. Maybe at the beginning of the unit, we go use that same standard and we say, all right, so why do these fish give scientists an eerie feeling? And we're looking at these Asian carp and how these carp impact populations, these invasive carp impact populations in Lake Erie. And that can be another example of just, you see if there's a small change in populations or biotic or abiotic factors, it changes other parts of that ecosystem as well. And then in addition, we look at lanternflies and how can that, uninvited guest disrupt the whole neighborhood. So small change, the biotic factors of that ecosystem can lead to dramatic shifts in the rest of the population. So throughout that one unit, you can use this single standard. And these are all different phenomena on inner orbit, where you can give students lots of opportunities to take what they learned about that kudzu and then say, apply that to coral, apply it to these carp, apply that to lanternflies. And so over and over and over, students see, whenever you teach me something, I'm going to see that in multiple different ways throughout the course of a unit and in lots of different phenomena. So every time you tell me something, I'm not going to get too attached to it, because those ideas will be something that I can see in lots of different ways. So that's the idea with this. And let's just say you're like, like my students are struggling with that middle school standard. I want to walk it back to something in third grade. So you can also walk it back to the third grade standard. So 3LS44. So from that middle school performance expectation, let's take it back to give students maybe some smaller steps for that standard. And so from that middle school standard, the third grade performance expectation that builds up into it is 3LS44, where students have to make a claim about the merit of a solution to a problem caused when environmental changes in the types of plants or animals that live there may change. So students need to understand, so they need to engage in argument from evidence, which is also the SEP for the other standard. They need to understand ecosystem dynamics and functioning, biodiversity, and also systems and system models. So they're just continuously seeing that, there are connections between these different populations. And so if we want to walk back and maybe, within our unit, we want to say, how can we solve a salty situation, and give students this example of, how salts accumulate in some environments, or how did wolves change the environment in Yellowstone Park? And give another example of what do you notice, what do you wonder about these wolves, how they impact other populations, or how can we remove these wild weeds from the Wild West and look at these populations of tumbleweeds that are, tremendously disruptive in some ecosystems, some places. I can't imagine those folks are excited at that house. I wonder how you even get all of those out. You can't shovel it like snow. It's probably blown in wind. Anyways, complicated stuff. So what we want to do here is give students examples of how at the third grade level, there are different design solutions we can use to affect how populations interact with each other, and then show them lots of examples of also how populations are interacting with small changes in their environment at the middle school level. And again, for that one standard that we just looked at, we want to give you lots of opportunities to take. These are all phenomena from the InOrbit website that you can take and repurpose in this way. And so some examples of how we can use these phenomena are, so that first phenomena, what's the correlation between global, we can give you lots of data on, how coral and marine populations and ocean temperatures are related. In the beginning of the unit, I might give you this as a class phenomena exploration. So as a whole class, we might walk through it and discuss it. So I might read this out loud, post it up on the board, give it printed out for kiddos. And as a teacher, I can have students contribute their understanding of DCI concepts. So what do you know about global warming and coral populations? Maybe there's some background knowledge there. Maybe there's not. And so we want to give them a little bit of context about those ecosystem dynamics. And then also I may include questions of saying, what are the parts of the system? How is coral related to global warming? How is global warming related to those fish populations? How do coral populations affect fish? We just ask questions about the system that they're working in and say, what evidence can you use to support that argument? So using the SEP and the cross-cutting concept of that standard and just asking lots of discussion questions about that. And then we can also use in the middle of the unit, maybe this phenomena about why do these fish give scientists an eerie feeling. And in this case, maybe we're going to print this out and scaffold up a group phenomena exploration. So I'm no longer going to do this as a whole class. I'm going to allow teacher or students in groups to go through a phenomena. So as a class, I might walk through the phenomena and then have students separate in groups to answer questions collaboratively. I can still identify and review DCI concepts to scaffold. So if there's some groups that still don't understand how different populations, impact other populations, and a small change can have a large impact. And I can let some groups roll with it. Maybe they're on a roll and they don't need that scaffolding. And so I can use that. And also, this gives students an opportunity to use and answer rigorous questions that target the DCIs, the cross-cutting concepts, the SCPs. And then I, as the teacher, though, can still provide a lot of scaffolding. And they can also get scaffolding and support from their group on their understanding. And so this is another way to use a phenomena in the middle of a unit in order to sort of like scaffold students up to that rigorous thing. And now let's see, we're at the end of our unit. I want to see if they can apply that understanding. So in preparing for that kudzu cluster, or those questions on the released KSA items, we can talk about lanternflies and say, okay, so lanternflies they're making a mess of things. And I want you to apply that understanding of, maybe we went over the kudzu, maybe we went over the Asian carp, maybe we also went over the coral and the global warming. And now I'm going to give you an individual assessment. So I'm going to build a short online assessment. You could use an Orbit for this, obviously. That's what we do. But those questions can scaffold up, and the students need to be able to engage with rigorous sense making independently at this point. We don't want students to be, trying to, pull lots of scaffolding at this point. We should have given them, if you used all those phenomena we mentioned, that's 7 different phenomena. So 6 from the in-orbit site and the kudzu as the additional phenomena. So they should understand now that populations are related. Changes in one population will impact other populations. And now we want them to apply that through the lens of this sense-making assessment. So you can still provide scaffolding if it's needed, but removing those scaffolds is important for building student independence and confidence. So we don't want to over-scaffold at this point. This is intended as like a summative assessment after you've given lots of different phenomena to pull together. And now we can just say, how are you doing with that? And then we can rinse, repeat next year and see how it goes. So some main takeaways on here is that practice makes perfect. And so we strongly recommend that phenomena are used throughout a unit to prep for state tests. Don't just use an anchor phenomena and a summative phenomena. Use many phenomena throughout the course of a unit to slowly bring students up to the point where they're being super, super successful. And then by using those different phenomena, we give more opportunities for myself as the teacher or other students to model and practice transfer of knowledge and sense making. Because the kid might be like, oh, just like how the coral impacts blah, 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 the Asian carp impact blah, blah, blah. Just like the lanternflies affect this, the kudzu affects that. And so we can continuously pull other examples and modeling of how to take that knowledge from one place and apply it to another place. You can also load the stakes with a prior grade. So if students, prior grade level phenomena can help give them more opportunities to make sense and identify possible gaps in knowledge or skills. So if there are areas where students are struggling from a prior grade level where they don't understand that one population can impact another, then those are things you can identify with those prior grade level phenomena just in classroom discussions. And what do you notice, what you wonder? And then you can apply those things when you're scaffolding for the on grade level content. Cool. So some strategies for KSA test prep, again, just to summarize and review. So a whole group discussion is like a super informal approach where you can kind of give some verbal questions. Phenomena can be projected up on the board. You can have 1 to 3 verbal discussion questions, and the teacher can lead a discussion and ask probing questions. What evidence supports that? How do you see this part of the system impacting this part? And some pros to this are it's super scaffolded and teacher directed, provides space for students to access prior knowledge in a low stakes context. And it also gives the teacher an opportunity to model sense making to students. So I know that changes in one population impact changes in other, or changes in the environment impact changes in population. So the coral or the changes in the ocean, the abiotic factors are impacting the coral, which is a biotic factor, which then maybe that's impacting other populations within that marine ecosystem. So just modeling the sense making for students over and over and over again. Some considerations here are that misconceptions may come to the surface, and you're also not holding individual students accountable in a meaningful way. So some students may be able to slide through that whole class discussion without really participating in it meaningfully. And so you could put structures in think pair shares, or talk to a partner about that. Tell me what your partner said in one sentence. And you could add structures in there, but this is definitely a very low stakes intentionally. We can also print that out as group work And so this can be lower stake with more formal questioning where, students choose or teachers choose a phenomena with 5 assessment items. Students have a paper with the phenomena and they can go through it. Some pros of this are that it's great for, working up to independent analysis. Students can write on the paper and not deal with technology. Sometimes that can be a barrier for kids to log into the thing and then do the stuff. However, students will always have the opportunity in this case to explain the reasoning to their classmates and go through the process of sense making together. Again, some students can model how they make sense of the phenomena for other students, or you as the teacher can scaffold that as well. Some things to consider here is this is great near the middle of unit. So students have some background, but now we're fostering idea sharing, collaboration, and then application. And then also have a whole group debrief afterwards. So let each of the groups work together to kind of solve those problems and figure it out. But at the end, pull it together and then hopefully your classroom doesn't look like this. This looks like a very, very quiet classroom. I prefer louder classrooms personally, but you give yourself the ability to redirect students if they need it or support students or say, great job, and reinforce the progress that kiddos are making. Finally, or a couple other options are that we can offer phenomena transfer stations. So we can have multiple phenomena and have less scaffolded group work. So you as the teacher have less control here because there's lots of different phenomena that they're using. So one thing you can do is print 3 to 5 different assessments for the same standard. So have lots of phenomena at different tables around the room, and students can explore them in groups. They can walk from table to table to table in stations. Some pros to this are students will see the same idea, so the same phenomena. You can use all of those examples we gave from elementary and middle school, but over and over and over see it. Oh, I get it. Ecosystems, changes in one part impact others. Changes in one part impact others. And they see it in all those examples. It also helps them make deep connections and spark curiosity. And it can be a way to scaffold formative questions to support students up to a rigorous sense-making question. So on InterOrbit, you could use those 2-dimensional questions. But if you're writing them on your own, you could say well, what patterns would be helpful for that? Or, what evidence would support that? And you can ask a big 3-dimensional question at the end. See if you can scaffold kiddos up to that point. Some considerations are in group students can support each other best with pre-assigned roles. As a former middle school teacher, I know that having very specific things that kiddos should do is really, really helpful. And also it's best implemented towards the end of a unit or learning so they can apply those ideas there. I also recommend that you have a full class debrief afterwards. What's cool about that, if kiddos see that same idea in multiple different, ways across the classroom, then you're going to have a rich discussion. So you're going to ask, what evidence? Where did you see that? How is this connected to that? How's that connected to this? And you can continuously just pull together these ideas and weave that tighter, net for students to catch your next phenomena, which is going to be a single phenomena with rigorous questioning as an online summative assessment. And that's what they're going to have to do for the KSA, and that's what we want to prepare them for. So we can choose 2 and 3-dimensional questions for the same standard for a formal online assessment. Obviously, InterOrbit has a lot of these, but you can write your own if that's what you're into. So students get practice with computer-based testing. We also can gather some deep data if you're using InterOrbit because we have really detailed reports, and it gives teachers the chance to check where are students at and where do they need support and where they're being successful. Just some notes on this is that students can now have an opportunity for independent sense making, which is what they need to do at the end. So this is challenging, but we want to give them the opportunity to slowly work their way up to this point. Considerations are that it's less scaffolded and some students may genuinely struggle. So just know that and prepare them for it. This is going to be really hard and you may not know the answer, but the idea with science is that you use what you know and you try to figure it out. Just like the last thing, this is best implemented towards the end of a unit, and you might not want to debrief for test security reasons, or there's going to be some kiddo in your classroom. It's nice, I'm going to share these answers with my friends. So maybe for those online summative assessments, don't debrief in a way where students could pull those answers and use them. All right. And that's it, y'all. Honestly, we flew through this and I really, really appreciate it. So we talked a lot about phenomena and transfer for the KSA, lots and lots and lots we went through. So we went through phenomena and sense making, what representation and sense making are in 2 different examples, the criteria for what a phenomena needs to be, which is novel and engaging, culturally relevant and accessible to students, and also some examples of phenomena in the KSA, some phenomena examples, some InterOrbit examples, and then finally some strategies for KSA test prep and phenomena. And so that's it, y'all. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. It was awesome to have you here. I'll hang out for a little while to answer additional questions if you have any. Otherwise, have a beautiful rest of your day. And if there's anything else that we can do to be helpful, I'll hang out and answer your questions. Thanks for being here, and I hope this was helpful.